Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today we're returning to the 00 Hub over on Quora to answer more questions pitched to me by members of the community. These videos allow me to interact with the community at large in a more intimate manner, and I can answer questions that are pitched to me that are either not been answered, there's not a lot of information about them, or just to get my particular angle and take on that particular question. And then in the never-ending quest to please the algorithm, I can splice this video up into smaller bite-sized chunks that I can then post both here as YouTube Shorts, but also over on platforms like TikTok, where my account is rapidly growing, with the long-term hope that this smaller bite-sized content may direct people back to the main YouTube channel where they can digest my long-form content, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, is what I'm best known for. Anyway, we're going to move on now and answer the questions that have been pitched to me via Quora. And remember, if you want your questions answered, feel free to pop across to Quora with the link down below, or pop them in the comments, and if they're particularly good questions and they get voted up, I may answer them. So, question 1. Why is it that people tell me that I make a really poor argument when I say 343 Industries should bring Assassinations back to Halo, as they didn't put Assassinations into Halo Infinite? It's not that it's a poor argument, it's just that there are likely tons of other features and quality of life updates that rank significantly higher in priority for Halo Infinite than the implementation of a feature that is only really utilised under very specific conditions within the game. Add to this that 343 have said that they'd need to completely retool the character models in order to work with Assassinations. It would seem the current level of work required to implement it far outweighs the benefit that would be gained by its presence. Am I the only one who thinks Halo Reach is the most overrated Halo of all time? No, you're likely not alone. Although I don't agree with your point, not everyone can love everything all the time. So the very fact that you think that it's overrated means there are likely tons of other people who agree. I'm just not one of them. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Reach is the greatest Halo game by a long shot, but it's certainly not the worst, and thus certainly not the most overrated. What are the impulse drives we see Seraphs and Space Banshees use in Halo Reach? When the Covenant fleet arrives over Reach at the end of Long Night of Solace, are they using impulse drives, or is that an interpretation of slipspace? It's never specifically explained what impulse drives are. The only law we have on the thrust methods of Covenant vessels is that of the repulsor drives. One can assume that impulse drives are simply a method of thrust that allows the craft in question to achieve very high velocities, likely increasing reactor output or the equivalent of their power source to enable the thrusters to work in something similar to an afterburner on our current modern day jet fighters. The only difference is that these are alien vessels in space where higher velocities can be achieved due to the absence of atmospheric drag. If a hostile Spartan in full Mjolnir armor with an AI companion were to appear on Earth today, what would it take to stop them? Although gameplay may make it seem like Spartans are unstoppable, the reality of how tough their armor is makes for a significantly different conversation. The armored shell of Mjolnir is around 2 inches of multi-layered titanium alloy of impressive strength, and the energy shields add another layer of protection that cannot accurately be accounted for, as the lore doesn't go into specifics. Then, under all of this, the underarmor is made of a titanium nanocomposite, which is a flexible, highly resilient underlayer providing additional protection to the occupant. With all that said, however, once the shields are breached with a sufficiently high enough kinetic energy, the armor shell isn't utterly indestructible. Far from it. From the lore, a single shot from an S2 sniper rifle carrying a .50 cal fin-stabilized discarding sabot round can drop the shields entirely, and a follow-up shot will blow through the armor and injure, if not kill, the Spartan inside. So either a marksman with a Barrett 50 cal anti-material rifle landing a couple of well-placed shots, or a similar weapon would be sufficient. And that's not to mention that tanks, helicopter gunships and fighter jets would have more than sufficient fire capability to stop a single Spartan, with or without an AI. Spartans are incredible, but they have their limits. The Ungoi seem rather hapless. How crucial are they to the Covenant? Could it survive without them? The Grunts are not a particularly crucial member of the Covenant. The Covenant existed before the Grunts and would likely get along well without them. This is not to say that grunts don't have their worth. Grunts were able to reproduce at incredible speeds and thus made excellent cannon fodder. They'd rush their enemies in huge numbers, literally crawling over their dead companions to kill their attackers. They'd either overwhelm them quickly or simply wear down their opponents until ammunition reserves ran dry and then bum rush them. The war with humanity would have continued relatively the same if the grunts were absent. It would have likely just been a little slower. Which Halo game has the best art style in your opinion? Well, in my opinion, Halo Infinite has the best art style. Not because it did anything in particular particularly well, but because it implemented the realization of multiple art styles that have been prevalent across many of the games and found a way to get them to coexist in an agreeable manner, whilst also innovating on previous styles to find its own theming and tones that suit the gameplay and the era. It could have done with being a little more gritty and a little less clean, but aside from this, it did remarkably well. With today's technology, would a craft like a Falcon or Pelican be possible? What about a longsword? The Falcon is most definitely possible. We already have craft out there that are very similar in form and factor to the Falcon. The Osprey is a great example of this. As for the Pelican, it's a huge aircraft, but we could build one that functions more or less exactly like the Pelican using jump jet and vectored thrust nacelles. Where our attempts to build a Pelican would fall flat would be armouring it as heavily as the Pelican is and making it trans-atmospheric, being able to transition from flying in the atmosphere to flying in low Earth orbit or even space without implementing an extremely complex single-staged orbit system of thrust. The longsword is a similar story. We can create flying delta-wing aircraft such as the stealth bomber, but the sheer scale and the trans-atmospheric method of propulsion would be our stumbling blocks with current technologies. Why didn't the Covenant Alliance simply ask humans to join the Great Journey in the Halo universe rather than get dragged into a costly war? The reason humanity was not invited to join the Covenant was simple. Since humans are recognised by foreigner devices as being reclaimers, it suggested to the Covenant leadership that humans were left behind from the Great Journey that happened 100,000 years ago, which was simply the firing of the Halo array and the reseeding of the galaxy. Since they have based their entire religion around the idea of activating the rings and achieving godhood, the possibility that some could be left behind suggests that what they believe is their great journey is not anything like the path to godhood. Humanity's very existence lies in direct contradiction to the beliefs upon which the Covenant exists, and the prophets derive their power and influence. To acknowledge humanity would be to admit they were wrong and submit their power to humanity. The Covenant would fall apart. The prophets cannot let that happen. So they waged a genocidal war against humanity, claiming us to be an affront to the gods. So really it boils down to the lies and manipulations of the Covenant's political powers desperately trying to maintain their control and position. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? How was the flood on Earth contained in Halo? They weren't. That's the whole point. The flood ship crashed in East Africa and flood specimens poured out across the lands. The only thing that stopped the flood from spreading across the entire planet were the Swords of Sanghelios, led by Artus Vadum, arriving in the Shadow of Intent with its fleet and glassing large portions of East Africa to destroy all specimens of the flood. Only this was what ultimately stopped their spread and saved humanity. What would happen if there were 2 Graveminds in Halo? Well, this has happened before in the Halo universe. A Gravemind is just a singular collection of enough biomass that has been collected that it develops the flood hive mind consciousness and begins to coordinate the flood across the galaxy. During the Fauna Flood War, the flood had spread so far and wide across the galaxy that there were innumerable quantities of biomass with sufficient size to harbour the consciousness of the Gravemind. But, as I previously stated, this is a hive mind, so more than one Gravemind would only be more than one in a physical sense. They'd both contain the same consciousness, just in more than one location, so this would only serve to enhance the Gravemind's awareness of events happening across the galaxy, giving it yet more perspectives to see the galaxy from, and giving it more intellectual power to outwit their opponents. What are the different Halo games? Well, in chronological release order, Halo CE in 2001, Halo 2 in 2004, Halo 3 in 2007, Halo Wars and Halo 3 ODST both released in 2009, followed by Halo Reach in 2010. Halo CE Anniversary, the 10-year anniversary of the original release of the game, was in 2011, with Halo 4 being released the following year in 2012. Halo Spartan Assault launched in 2013, with Halo 2 Anniversary along with the Master Chief Collection launching in 2014. The following year in 2015, Halo 5 launched along with Halo Spartan Strike. 2016 saw the release of Halo Wars 2 with Fireteam Raven released in 2018, and most recently Halo Infinite launched in 2021. Could a Pelican, Prowler or Vulture be used in deep space in the Halo universe? The Prowler, yes, because it's a vessel that is meant to be used in deep space. The Vulture and Pelican, no, because it lacks the long-term life support systems and, more importantly, slipspace engine technology to allow faster-than-light travel. That's not to say that these ships couldn't be used to make interplanetary travel more accessible, but anything outside of this, as far as range is concerned, is a big no-go. Why are all the trees in Halo Infinite conifers? Well, because the entirety of the campaign takes place in coniferous forest biomes on Zeta Halo. Now, Zeta Halo does have other biomes, we just don't visit them during the campaign. There were likely plans to visit other biomes during the campaign DLC that was planned but actually never reached release. Now that all DLC has been cancelled, we likely will never see any other biomes, which is a real shame. Unless, of course, the next game also takes place on Zeta Halo. Is Master Chief a real US Armed Forces rank? Yes, there are actually technically a few ranks that have the shortened title Master Chief in the Armed Forces, but all fall within the pay grade of E9. There is Master Chief Petty Officer, abbreviated to MCPO or MICPO, Command Master Chief Petty Officer, abbreviated to CMC or Command Chief, Force Master Chief Petty Officer or FORCM, otherwise known as the Force Chief, the Fleet Master Chief Petty Officer, abbreviated to FLTCM or Fleet Chief, and finally Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, abbreviated to MCPON or MICPON, also known as the Navy Chief or the Master Chief. As with Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, there can only be one occupying this rank at any given time. What is the most powerful weapon in Halo other than the Halos? It's technically a toss-up between the glassing beams of the Covenant capital ships, as they are capable of rendering the surface of a planet into glass from orbit at immense speed, and the supermach cannons of orbital defense platforms, as these impart a single round with the equivalent energy of 50 SAR bombers. I'm performing calculations for the energy of glassing beams, so I will update when I know more. Although I will give this answer an addendum in saying that there is a prototype explosive known as the Nova Bomb that's only really been observed of being used once, maybe twice, in the entire history of the Halo universe, particularly towards the latter years of the war. But again, it is a prototype, we haven't seen any examples of it since, and by definition it was just an assembly of different nuclear missiles that were designed to all fire inwards on themselves and have the blast contained for a split second longer, boosting the thermonuclear yield. On the occasions that one of these bombs were detonated, it managed to completely and utterly glass one side of a planet and fracture its moon. But again, we've only seen it be used once, maybe twice. And again, an addendum to that is that there are some Forerunner weapons that were likely even more powerful than that, but we just don't know enough information about them. And that does it for today's episode of Quora, and remember, if you want your questions answered, either hit the link down below for Quora or pop them in the comments, and if the comment gets voted up, I'll get round to answering the question. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider hitting the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Be sure to like the video if you did, and pop a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. I just want to take a moment to thank my patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my facility, Falcon, Sophia, Mikhail, Ashley, Jordan and Esoteric Sight, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Legions Lost, Lab Rat, Spartan0137, Jacob Kemp, Sean, Element Zero, J3, Mr. Keys, Gunslinger, Evermore, Personal Devil, Aldeas, Toxic, Scion Esports, Gem, Saber and Relentless, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, my loyal enforcers, and all other patrons who continue to support the channel. If you want your name on the end of the video and some perks earned along the way, head over to Patreon and consider supporting the channel yourself. Big shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob Kemp, Talia, Fenrir, Bornstella, Jimbo and Balaz, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy, with a special mention to the Accursed Hunter. Shout out to John due to the mathematical formula used to determine the area within a pentadodecahedron. Oh, and Lena because that sandwich. And remember, there are tons of ways to support the channel and keep my installation pumping out content at a breakneck speed. Much love to you all, take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.